Hello. In this week's parsha, Parshat Tsav, two verses which come back to back speak of the fire on the altar in the temple which should not be extinguished. One verse says, "Va'esh al hamizbeach tukad bo lo tichbeh." The fire that is on the altar should burn there and should not be extinguished. The verse immediately following says, "Eish tamid tukad al hamizbeach lo tichbeh." An eternal fire, a permanent fire, should burn on the altar, should not be extinguished. Already, Avraham ibn Ezra points out that the only addition the second verse adds is the word tamid, meaning forever, or in a negative sense, never. Otherwise, it just repeats what the previous verse said, and as you all know, whenever there is a seeming superfluousness in the verse or in the Torah, it's a cause for midrashic elaboration. And there have been quite a few very nice homilies on this second verse. One speaks of this eternal flame which should never be extinguished as the flame with which we try to burn away our bodily passions, our connection to the material world. However, a very nice interpretation in which, in my view, the full force of the creative application of midrashic hermeneutics is applied comes from the tradition of Chabad. The Alter Rebbe tells us that his teacher told him repeatedly, 10 times, on the basis of this verse, that he should always be at work burning away, destroying the complaints, the negative rhetoric which the Misnagdim spread about Chasidus. Now, why does this interpretation, or how does this interpretation manifest the full beauty and creative application of midrashic hermeneutics? It appears especially in the second part of the verse, lo tichbeh. On the face of it, a negative imperative, or a negative imperfective, if you wish, maybe. It should not be extinguished, or do not extinguish, where lo, as everyone who knows Hebrew will realize, is the negative particle. But in the interpretation of this Hasidic master, lo is not a negative particle, but it's a direct object. Lo means the no, the negativity which the Misnagdim are spreading about Chasidus, and the command becomes a positive one. Tichbeh lo, you should extinguish, burn away. You should extinguish the lo, the negative rhetoric, the false campaign which the Misnagdim are waging against the Hasidim. You should have an eternal fire in which you are always burning away, eliminating these negative remarks. Interestingly enough, just a few weeks ago in Parshat Vayakhel, we had another verse which speaks about burning. Lo tevaru eish b'chol mosotechem b'yom HaShabbat. Do not kindle a fire in all of your dwellings on the Sabbath day. Now, of course, there are at least 3 very major differences. First, this is a command that applies b'chol mosotechem to our dwellings, not to the temple. In fact, the rabbis have pointed out that the point is that in the temple we do burn fire on a Sabbath, but in our dwellings we do not. This verse applies only to the Sabbath, and it even has a different verb for the burning. Instead of tukad, it has tevaru. But still, this verse as well has received some nice homiletical interpretations. I'll mention 2. One connects it to the Sabbath in a very odd way, perhaps, but interesting. The idea is that during the week we're simply too busy to get into fights and arguments with each other. But on the Sabbath, when we're not at work, we have the day off, and we're meeting friends, there's a chance that the meeting will develop into a discussion, and the discussion will develop into an argument, and the argument will morph into a fight. And that is the fire which should never be kindled on the Sabbath. Of course, it should never be kindled at all, but the danger of it being kindled on the Sabbath, because we are not at work and not so occupied with our worldly matters, the danger in the Sabbath is greater, so the Torah mentions it in connection with the Sabbath. Another very nice interpretation comes from another great Hasidic master, the José Lublin. He interprets the fire here much as many Hasidim interpreted the fire in the verse in Tsav, as referring to the fire with which one tries to burn away connection to the material world, material impulses, the striving to achieve, to acquire more and more wealth, fame, and so on and so forth, as well as the strong, passionate crying of the person who's sincerely trying to do tshuva, to return to God. And the José Lublin says, this verse tells us that on the Sabbath, this fire should not be kindled. On the Sabbath, take it easy. So we see here 3 different ways in which to approach the idea, the metaphor at least, of burning. One fire should never be extinguished, not on the Sabbath, not on a weekday. That's the fire of religious devotion, of religious commitment, of drawing near to God, and that sort of fire. Another fire should never be kindled, not on the Sabbath and not on a weekday. That is the fire of anger, of controversy, of hatred, of incitement. And then there's another fire which should be controlled, the fire in which we try and control ourselves. We try and burn away our material ambitions and our mental, conscientious connection to this world, this impermanent material world. That fire should burn full force during the week. But on the Sabbath, on Shabbat, relax. Enjoy the 3 Seudot, take a good nap, and relax and have a good Shabbos.